Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Aykroyd Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 1995 comedy titled Canadian Bacon. Now, Canadian Bacon runs for 1 hour and 35 minutes long. It is directed by Michael Moore. It is produced by David Brown, Michael Moore, and Ron Rotholtz. The script was written by Michael Moore. The score was done by Elmer Bernstein and Peter Bernstein. The cinematography was done by Haskell Wexler, and it was edited by Wendy Stanzler and Michael Berenbaum. And the stars of the movie are John Candy, Alan Alda, Rhea Perlman, Kevin Pollak, Rip Torn, Kevin J. O'Connor, Bill Nunn, G.D. Spradlin, Stephen Wright, Jim Belushi, Wallace Shawn, and Dan Aykroyd in an uncredited role as a Border Patrol guard in one scene. Now, I have seen my share of awful films based off of Washington, themes like Dave and Protocol, but in movies dealing with American presidents and their questionable intentions, none has ever been so revolting as the very revolting Canadian Bacon. The mastermind behind the lenses is the iconic documentary filmmaker and liberal biased Michael Moore, who reached iconic status after the success of his satirical documentary Roger and Me, and his anti-Republican television series TV Nation. In Canadian Bacon, Moore decides he wants to go light by hoping that his cheeky satirical film will have us laughing our asses off. But there's only one problem. No one is laughing. I didn't find anything at all humorous about this movie. In fact, I found it to be extremely prejudiced and extremely offensive. And even though, as a North American Indian, I do not define myself as a Canadian, but geographically, my reserve is in Canada, so therefore, I do take this as a pot shot, a jab, and I just think that this movie is very, very insulting. Even though it's meant to be tongue-in-cheek, I still found this movie to be extremely offensive and extremely insulting, and I am appalled at myself for even sitting here watching this abomination. Even though it stars a cornucopia of comedic performers like Alan Alda, Rip Torn, Rhea Perlman, Steve Wright, Dan Aykroyd, and the late John Candy, their talents are just terribly wasted here. In fact, there probably were only 3 funny moments in this movie. But those moments didn't last long, and it was just totally forgotten moments later. I'm sorry. And I'm not trying to sound like a cynical prude. I do have a sense of humor. I do enjoy a good comedy. But if it's paid at the expense of Canada, that is just totally unacceptable. All the stereotypes and all the negative cliches that that have been passed down to against Canadians is really, really appalling. And we don't say words like a boot and who's. And we don't have 11 months of winter. We have 4 seasons like your friends down south. We don't have polar bears and arctic foxes running around on our backyards. Tim Hortons was never our president because, number one, we never had a president. Our head is a prime minister. It's just so excruciatingly bad. I don't understand why people would praise over such offense and such tripe as this movie. It sickens me. And if you think that all the Canadian stereotypes is sickening, the plot was just as convoluted and stupid, to say the least. So the story goes a little something like this. Alan Alda stars as the President of the United States. He doesn't have a name. He is just Mr. President. And he's slipping on the ratings poll of confidence in the general public. So, with the suggestion of his bumbling aides, played by Rip Torn and Kevin Pollak, they decide to declare war on Canada. They decided that, well, at first their original intentions was to restart the Cold War. But however, the Russian president, Vladimir Khrushchev, played by Richard Council, decided that he didn't want to, he had shown no interest in restarting the Cold War. So this was all just a ruse just so that the president can regain his popularity. By May, we're bored. Our troop is not fighting. We are at peace. But of course, that does not sit well to the warmongering Americans. So, okay, maybe in all fairness, they're also being lampooned as well. As a bunch of warmongering, uberly patriotic individuals. But still, I bet you they're probably just as offended as Canadians are. So the opening scenes sees our nameless president in Niagara Falls to confront a defense contractor who's down on his luck. I'll leave it to good old Mikey Moore. He definitely has the pleasure of exploiting dedicated Americans who's hard on their luck, which gives him the liberty of demonizing the evil bigwig corporations from keeping the middle person down. Which is why there is the caricatured right-wing military businessman by the name of R.J. Hacker, played by G.D. Spradlin, who blames the president for his enterprise, Hacker Dynamics, to be shut down because the uber-democratic president believes in the future of the children reigns more supreme than the war. Well, FYI, the Democratic Party does not have much of a difference as the Republicans. Just like here in Canada, the Conservatives and the Liberals, you don't really find that much differences either. So Hacker wants the president to restart the Cold War and to lead the conflict with the Ruskies in full force, of course. The Russians don't want to. So their next option, let's start a war with Canada. So with the president at war with Canada, he hopes that it will win him another 4 years in the White House, rejuvenate his trust from his fellow Americans, and the Canadian cliches will be oozing out faster than the maple from our maple trees, making us look like a couple of saps. Eh? So the film shifts around between the superficial looking White House and the towns within the Canadian US border, as some working class Americans get into some scuffle, and while this is happening, Hacker has placed missile silos across the country which could eventually wipe us out. So, okay, it's not exactly a full blown Washington story, but the political agenda is truly in full force and has no apologies bearing it. The decision making process is what makes this a Washington themed movie. Moore himself actually said that the film was inspired by George Bush Sr. and the events that led to the Iraq War and the media coverage that went with the package. So Moore guarantees that his audience will bite into his witty and satirical delivery as he's laughing at the expense of Canadians and what we're famous for. The gags here feel like lost sketches from the old SCTV, who, by the way, was created by Canada's own Lorne Michaels. That's right, the creator of Saturday Night Live. Who happens to be Canadian, eh? And the jokes are definitely at our expense, including drinking beer all the time. Mounties being our main police task force when we have our own police forces here. Different of them. They're not all dressed like our CMPs. Long cold winters. Well, FYI, I told you before, we have 4 seasons. We have winter, spring, summer, and fall. It's not 11 months of winter and July. We don't go snowshoeing to our neighbors' houses or to the store. Sure, we have a lot of Tim Hortons restaurants, but it's not like we go there all the time. We don't eat only just poutine with maple syrup, pancakes, and bacon. We eat other varieties of food. We don't wear toques all year long or checkered lumberjack jackets. So this is really, really horrifically insulting. And you know what the worst part is that I have supported Michael Moore in a lot of the movies he makes. Even if at times they can be a bit convoluting and at times they can be a bit insulting sometimes or just only filled with half truths and full lies. But I just don't feel that insulting Canadians at their expense is guaranteed anything remotely humorous. And you could just laugh and joke about it all he wants, but it's still abuse. It's verbal abuse. And that is totally intolerable. We don't listen to Anne Murray. I'm not a big fan of Anne Murray's music. She doesn't even write her own songs. And there's a lot more. And we do listen to American and British music and music from all around. We don't just There's more artists out there than just Anne Murray. We also have Joni Mitchell, Corey Hart, Bryan Adams, A Simple Plan, Counting Crows, The Guess Who, Paul Anka, and a whole bunch more. I just threw a few out there. And the way we talk and the way we act, which also includes apologizing all the time. Every Canadian are gentle, loyal, polite, and we apologize and we say please and thank you. Why not? Isn't it nice to to say thank you? Isn't it nice to be polite? But not every Canadian is polite. There are also just as much assholes in Canada as there is in the United States. We're not perfect. And then there was also a scene where they took place in Toronto and they said something like, this looks like Albany, only cleaner. And then you walk, and in the scenes they see them walking in Toronto, and there's not very many people there. Hello, Toronto is the 5th most populous city in North America. It's got a population of close to 3 million people. It's also a bustling town that hardly sleeps, too. And it's got skylines just like the American cities. And it's not copying Seattle, Washington with the Sky Dome, with the CN Tower, and the Space Needle. So it's not plagiarizing Seattle either. And I'm from the Atlantic provinces. So I don't know your buddy Frank from Vancouver. Because we don't have one road. We have lots of roads. And I'm from Quebec. Quebec and British Columbia are far away. It's like New York City to Seattle. Far away. So this is offense. This is really, really offensive material. And Michael Moore should be ashamed of himself. Well, from my research, this film was to be released before John Candy's last film, Wagons East. But, due to a poor showing with the test audiences, it was held back. But Moore denied the claim, as he believes that it was from the political negative backlash, because Hollywood thought it was too liberal biased, even for their standards. It was the politics that seemed to be much more tamed, but the satire was just way too brutal. Now look, I know people probably might think that I'm a stickler, that I'm a stick in the mud, and that I'm just and that I have no sense of humor. But I do have a sense of humor, and I will laugh when I find something funny. I just didn't find anything at all funny about this movie at all. It was offensive, it was insulting, and it was just putting salt to the wounds to all the negative stereotypes that Canadians had to defend themselves with. We watch more than just hockey on our stations. We have tons of television stations, and they don't just show hockey games. Sure, hockey is our Canadian sport. It is our sport that we watch and that we love and that we worship. But hockey is not an all year thing. Even the NHL takes its summers off. And during that period of time, we watch other sports too. And even on other stations too, we watch other sports like football, baseball, soccer, tennis, golf, figure skating, if you like that kind of stuff. And of course, basketball, which, by the way, was not invented in America. It was invented by it was invented in Canada by a Canadian. It just became a popular sport in America. But the invention of basketball was in Canada. Just something for you all to think about. It was just tiring to watch. And if all the whole political satire was enough to make our blood boil, the plot of the story was also convoluted and stupid too. So with all that in mind, out of a scale of 10, I give Canadian Bacon, I might be being generous here, but I give Canadian Bacon a 4. I do not recommend this movie. I'm sorry. If you like this kind of stuff, well, okay, that's fine. The more power to you. I respect your opinions. You're all entitled to it. It just didn't sit very well. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. Just remember, be kind, be courteous, and don't be rude. And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Aykroyd Writer saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.